Hey friends, thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation Dick and I had about the 2025 Dutch, Italian, and Azerbaijani Grand Prix. Are Max and Red Bull back for real? It seems that bad luck and mistakes plague McLaren drivers. Unexpected podiums, Carlos and Williams, Isaac and Racing Bulls. As you'll hear, Dick and I unpack our highlights from this month's races. But before we get to our conversation, I need to ask, can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. Hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, Dick. I think I say this every time we do a monthly race review. It's been a long time because it's always at least a month, right? It has been a long time. And I think some people might have wondered why this didn't go out last week. We actually intentionally didn't schedule this for last week because we were finishing up our F1 Legends series, and it just made sense to let that run through. And kind of selfishly, I was so busy and I did not have time to sit down with you to talk about the races, to the point that I literally crammed today to catch up on everything.
Yeah. Sabrina cramming versus me preparing. There's a big, it's like a gap like the Grand Canyon. It's just to our listeners, when Sabrina says she's prepared, let me tell you what, she is preparing a legal brief, is what she's doing. Me, I'm kind of, pulling out of my back pocket, so to speak, and saying, "Yep, feels good. Let's go." So
I
we are
love
the
it.
yin and yang. We are the yin and yang
Definitely.
for
Definitely. I
sure.
mean, this is why I'm glad that we're a team. And I love because you also help me to rein it in as much as you're able to help me rein it in, because I'm also a little stubborn. And so it's really good. So all that to say is we have a lot of ground to cover.
We do.
And I'm really excited because the more I was cramming, the more I had more thoughts about this and thought, okay, going into the summer break, we kind of were resigned to what we thought was going to be reality. But then
Yeah.
you go through August and September, and that was definitely not reality. So we have a lot to
Yep.
unpack. So let's get started with our race highlights. Do you want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay. So Zandvoort, my highlight was Isaac making it onto the podium. I mean, for essentially the entire race, he was staring at the back of Max and he did not droop or wane. I mean, he showed his mettle. And for me, he's very endearing. And you know that, especially after everything that happened in Australia and just his resilience. So then to see his celebrations with the team, oh my goodness. I teared up watching that, and it felt so different than the tears that I had in Australia, which felt so good this time.
Yeah.
What about
Yeah.
you?
Well, I think obviously, yes. Who couldn't have been moved by Isaac and the kind of drive that he had. I mean, that was amazing. It just goes to show that this young man he's just going from strength to strength. Like you said, Australia was a tough race for him, but it was also tough for a lot of guys. I mean, remember, the same stuff that caught him out eventually caught out Fernando Alonso, for crying out loud. So, it's hopefully he didn't beat himself up too much in Australia, but the way he's grown and developed over the season been pretty amazing. The other thing I will say about Zandvoort was, and we got to talk about it just a little bit, and that's Lando Norris's engine blowing up on him.
Yes.
That was just, when you think about the mistake that he made in Canada that cost him all sorts of points, and then you look at this engine blowing up in Zandvoort. Man, oh man, if those two things hadn't happened, the drivers' championship would look way different today. So, anyway, man, when that happened, I was really sitting there thinking to myself, unless Oscar either makes some boneheaded moves or he has bad luck and just, has a mechanical failure like Lando, championship is pretty much his to lose at this stage. So that was my thought at Zandvoort. Now, it's changed a little bit since then, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because I was absolutely shocked by that engine failure. Were
Mhm.
you caught off guard by that as well? Or is that kind of, I mean, because I know in the eras past, that type of reliability issues were more common. We don't see that anymore. And
Right.
especially for a team running at the front, it felt so like heartbreaking. What are your thoughts? Was that predictable? Could they have anticipated this?
Nah, I don't think they could have, but probably what happened was is that, there was some part that for whatever reason was just a little bit substandard and they missed it in the assembly process and the engine eventually blew up. I'd be interested to know how many laps or how many miles that particular power unit had on it when it blew up.
Yeah, that's a good question because don't a lot of teams end up doing power unit changes at Monza,
You would
like in
think
time for
so
that race,
because,
right?
yeah, you would think so because they would want to have the freshest engines possible because Monza is so horsepower dependent. So, yeah,
Hmm.
probably. Hmm.
So maybe it's like you said, the amount of miles it was at, it just a little bit earlier than anyone would have wanted it. Definitely
That's right.
not in the middle of a race.
Right.
Who wants that? Okay, so then moving on to Monza. For me, my highlight was it was another Max Verstappen masterclass. I mean, his
Yep.
commentary during the race regarding the McLaren decision to swap positions just showed everybody like his mental capacity as he's driving at a
Yep.
premier level. Like they gave us the microphone exchange between him and GP, and he's like laughing at the fact that McLaren has swapped Lando and Oscar. And then to find out at the end of the race, he had set the record for winning the race, like as in the speed itself.
Right.
I
Right.
just was like, this guy, wow. So for me,
Yeah.
that was the highlight of that race. What about you?
Well, I think very similar, actually. I thought it was really interesting. I mean, the Red Bull just came alive. So did they find some way of optimizing the car, or did they throw a little tweak on it that suddenly, made the setup window maybe a little bit less tricky? I don't know. I mean, but yeah, I mean, it was just amazing, how fast all those guys are running. I mean, just to give you an idea, Max won that race in an hour and 13 minutes. Okay. Baku, the race afterwards, he won it in an hour and 33 minutes. So it was 20 minutes longer at Baku to go the same race distance. And Zandvoort was a minute 38. So that was 25 minutes longer. So that gives you an idea because I mean, it's not like Zandvoort or Baku are slow, but it just goes to show you how fast Monza is. It's amazing.
That is amazing. So let me ask you, going back to what you said about what did they maybe tweak? It, Monza would be a circuit they would want to throw more downforce on the car, right?
Less downforce.
Less
Yeah.
downforce.
Yeah.
You're
Less
really wanting,
downforce, less drag. Yep.
okay, okay, because you're wanting to rely on mechanical grip
Yep.
more there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of the long straightaways, you
Right,
know.
right. Okay. If anybody hasn't taken the time to listen to the tech series that you've done, they need to go back and listen to that. And if anything, after you just answer the question, just remembered I probably need to go back and get a refresher on that because you did such a great job. You did a great job explaining the
No,
value of
thank you.
downforce versus or the relationship between mechanical grip and downforce in our
Yep.
Aero series.
Yep.
Okay, so then the Baku race.
Hmm.
I don't think this is going to surprise you, but for me, the highlight was Carlos getting onto the podium with Williams,
Yep.
and it would actually be the quali
Yeah.
session. I
Yeah.
mean, that one I just kept going, this is somebody throwing bananas out there? What's going
Right.
on? It was
Right.
unbelievable to me. And I thought it was fascinating to hear how the racers were giving commentary as to the environment and all the variables that they were running in through that
Right.
session. But Carlos and Williams, the emotion of that. And then I don't know if how much you're following the socials on the teams, but earlier in the week, Williams had this question, virtual questions that were submitted, and the drivers got to watch these videos. And there was this little girl who had this unicorn, and she asked them, both Alex and Carlos, what she should name it, and if she made the sticker, would they put it on their helmet. And so they both of them said, yeah, if you send it to us, we will. And he did. He put it on his helmet. And so I just thought that was the sweetest thing. And
That's awesome.
apparently, yeah, like apparently they even put the sticker on the trophy. And so like in the socials, it was even highlighting that they should keep the sticker on his helmet for the rest of the year and that there should be more stickers going around. The superstitions aspect of racing, I thought was just fun and such a great example of how Williams has sought to build the energy in their socials in
Hmm.
a positive way. I
Yeah.
thought was really smart. What
No,
about you?
that's
What
really
was your
cool.
highlight for Baku?
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed the qualifying session because those guys were so struggling with the wind. I mean, they were they trashed a lot of equipment because, there's lots of big buildings, right? And it causes kind of a Venturi effect. It was quite breezy. And then of course it'd go between two windows and that wind would accelerate. And so, you'd have a situation where it was almost like a game of Russian roulette. They were, you know, okay, I'm coming up to a gap between two buildings. Has the wind stopped blowing or is it blowing? One of those deals. So, I mean, it would have been easy to get caught off guard if you're that much on the limit. And then all of a sudden you get, a side, a side wind as you're trying to go into a corner. Or in some cases, they actually got this massive tailwind just about the time they were getting to the braking zone and they were getting ready to brake the regular spot, except they were going way too fast because of the tailwind. So that made it really, really interesting. The other thing that I would say, loved seeing Carlos on the podium. The other part was, I guess George Russell had been sick all weekend long, and he certainly pulled off a terrific result as well. They interviewed him after the race, and you could tell he had left everything in that cockpit, man. He was done. So those are my takeaways.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. And we definitely need to bring that up when we get to the Mercedes team by team discussion, which leads me to let's move on to that.
Nice
First would be,
segue.
thank you. First would be our McLaren duo, Lando and Oscar. I wonder, would you like me to give my thoughts and then
Go
you
for
tell
it.
me if I'm on the right path,
Go for
Obi-Wan?
it.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay, here we go. So I would say is after Baku, Oscar leads the drivers' championship while Lando sits second, and that's gap, as you noted. When you were talking about Zandvoort, that gap was at least at
Pretty
that
big.
point seemed like pretty big. But at
Yep.
this point, after Baku, it's tightened quite a bit. And then in
Yep.
the constructors, McLaren has a very commanding lead and could, in theory, clinch the title in Singapore. But I think both Oscar and Lando want to win on merit. But then you have things like the Monza pit stop. I think that really was hard for me to understand why that happened. And I think overall, Oscar really improved, like he improves consistently and really well. But then you have something like what happened at Monza. I wonder how much that has messed with his head because he did great at Zandvoort. And then you have a Baku, which was like the only word I could write in my notes was yikes. He crashed. And then Lando has that second bad pit stop. Stella says that at Baku, the car didn't have pace. And then I'm wondering, well, is that really what it is? Or was it a more conservative strategy? Then, again, coming back to those pit stop issues. And then Oscar having all these uncharacteristic mistakes. Is it the pressure of the championship getting to him and Delando? What more could they do? And and then of course he being Oscar at the start of Baku, he did that jump start and then
Yep.
he had the anti-stall and then the crash. And I'm just wondering if those might all be a tell as to where he is mentally, which is so unusual and uncharacteristic for him. I keep coming back to Monza and thinking it wasn't good and I have to believe that that swap really messed with his head. So what are your thoughts about that? Because like Oscar is always unflappable and it seems like he's flapped.
Yep. So my take on all of this is that Oscar's in a position where it's his to win it. Lando really, because of that engine failure in Zandvoort, he really shouldn't be feeling nearly as much pressure as Oscar. But the problem is, and I think this is maybe more of it than anything, They're desperately trying to beat each other. And all of a sudden, here comes Max, and Max suddenly just 2 races in a row kicked them in the rear end all the way around that track. I mean, it was a beatdown from Max. And I think they're like, holy moly, where did this come from? We thought we had the car. Maybe we don't. I think it's that outside, you're coming into the party. Oh my gosh, we've got to keep up with Max now because clearly something has happened to that car. And because we all know Max hasn't forgotten how to drive. I think it's going to be really fascinating to see what happens. Now, and I may be getting a little ahead of myself. I do think Singapore is going to be really interesting because Red Bull historically has been okay, but not great at Singapore. And so it may very well be that Oscar and Lando have it pretty much their way and they can fight it out at the front. But man, the way Max was running at Monza and again at Baku, I don't know. If he had dominated at Monza and was kind of so-so at Baku, then I would say, it's probably what you're going to see at Singapore. But Baku's a street circuit and Singapore's a street circuit, so could be interesting.
I mean, I hear you about the Max coming in and kind of changing the game, but I keep coming back to in the Monza race, when you listen to them until the pit stop issue happens,
Mhm.
both of them had a pretty commanding presence. It looked like it was going to be pretty much a 1-2 McLaren. They seemed to be coping with the tires well. And then the pit stop happens and then the word comes to Oscar to change. I don't know. I feel like this I've been okay until now with the quote papaya rules, and I've understood why the teams will always want to put the constructors ahead of any drivers
Right.
competition. I get that. Like, and I agree with that because that's where your money is. But the two of them have been operating within that. Well, even Lando was quiet at the end of that race, even though he had got like in the radio, he didn't really say anything. It was Oscar made a statement, and then Lando was quiet, almost as if he was in shock. It seemed like that this had happened, and I don't know. I just struggle with it because that kind of head game on two guys who are, as you're saying, rivals with each other, trying to do it cleanly. They seem like both of them want to win by merit, not by any kind of underhandedness or shadiness. They just want to do good and prove everybody that they're the best. And I wish they hadn't done it because it feels like that was that. And then I can see your point and say that, well, that's an additional variable that just has only messed with their minds, both of them. Because I think Lando walked away from Zandvoort deflated, right? Because the
Sure, had
reliability
to have
out of
been.
his control, right? He had to have been. So he's coming into Monza thinking, okay, I'm going to reset this. I'm going to do this. Like, I think he got a little fire under him. And then for that swap to happen the way that it did makes me just wonder, did it unintentionally mess with probably both of them? I guess that's where I'm. And then going back to Singapore, because Oscar crashed at Baku, he now has a 5 second grid or 5 second penalty, which likely will be, I think I read, a 3 place grid penalty in Singapore. How does that help him? Like it
Ooh,
just,
yeah,
I mean, even if he gets on pole, the guy's still going to be down 3 places on at Singapore of all places. And I was trying to look back and think through what is McLaren's history at that track, and I honestly couldn't figure that piece out. But I felt like it wasn't like they have this history of just knocking it out of the park. So in my mind, I'm thinking that it's not until Coda that you could truly see whether or not these guys have been able to get things like mentally back into the position that we probably would have expected pre Zandvoort, like summer,
sure.
post summer. I don't know. Maybe I'm over analyzing it, getting overly emotional, probably because it just really bothered me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
that's my rant. That's my
Yeah, no, no,
rant.
no. And I'm really kind of just processing this, but I think, yeah, I think that there probably is some unintentional consequences that have come from papaya rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it probably does. I still have to believe that to a certain degree that when Lando's engine blew up at Zandvoort, he's got to feel like he's the guy with the less pressure,
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
engine blows up, no fault of his own. And it's just sort of like, well, now we're just racing, you know,
Yeah.
see how many
Well,
race wins we can take.
especially coming out of summer break where he's most recharged, most ready to bring it, and then it comes out of your control, this type of situation. And then you're again going to Monza saying, okay, I have nothing to lose. I'm going to do well. And he is, and the pit stop again is out of his control.
Yep.
And then the team makes this decision. It's just, I don't know. The competitor aspect of it just feels like he
Hmm.
doesn't, he would likely not want anyone to question as he gets his point. I feel like that the team and the drivers going into Singapore are going to be in a super high pressure, super tricky situation to navigate on multiple levels, both strategy, pit stops, how do you handle the heat, how do you like qualifying, all these different elements. And then if it's not threaded carefully, I just wouldn't want to see either of these two. Like, I guess in the image on my hand is like sand going through their hands. I don't want them to see the championship go out of their hands again after
Right.
last year, when going back to what you said, Max has now figured out a way. Like, statistically, it seems improbable that Max could close the gap.
Right.
But if this spiral continues at McLaren, then and Max
It's
finds his
possible.
resurgence, it's possible. It's
Yeah.
super improbable, but then this is the guy. Both this is the team that's doing things a little bit uncharacteristic to the way the most teams would have. Like, I think based off of stuff that you've shared in all your different educational series and the stuff that John has shared and I've read, it seems like at this point teams usually choose who is going to be their number one. Like, who are you going
Sure.
to just write? And I feel
Sure.
like because McLaren's trying to kind of rewrite the book, it's also bringing in things that maybe most people would have avoided because they had made it very clear who's
Right.
number one, and we're all consolidating towards that. And by trying to ride two horses and two stallions who are just amazing, you might actually lose it. And I would hate to see that again.
Yeah. See, here's the other part. And again, I might be getting ahead of myself. You look at Max's body language,
Mm-hmm.
he is so relaxed. He is
Yes.
just showing up and he is there to win that race. He's not thinking championship. He's not thinking nothing. All
That's
he's
right.
thinking about is win.
Right.
And, I don't know if he wins out, if that means he could be world champion or not. Because it depends on what happens at McLaren, like you say. But he's got to be putting so much pressure on, and he is just hard enough to be sitting there enjoying watching the McLaren guys squirm because he's been in
Yes.
that position. They haven't.
Yes. I think you're 100% spot on that. I mean, and the fact that he's going and doing the other racing
Yeah,
elsewhere, I think is, yeah, you're
yeah,
totally, but we have to save that to the later discussion of Red Bull. Let's get to Mercedes, and then I think the next one would be Red Bull. So you talked about Russell. I agree with you on Russell. He did a great job at Baku, that pit stop, and his ability to maintain the P2 in that latter stint. I thought really showed his skill and determination. I, like you, didn't realize he was sick. And so I was like, wow, he was able to stay out of trouble and just get those points that they needed. And it really impressed me. And then going back to like the team itself, I think Mercedes moved up to the third in constructors while Ferrari dropped. And George now sits in fourth while Kimmy's now seventh. I've been really thinking about how much I want to continue rooting for Kimmy because
yep,
this month and really leading into the summer, it was rough for him. And I do give him a lot of grace because of his youth. His demeanor is such that makes me think that he has a more tender spirit, not to be mistaken for like weakness. He just needs to be, I think I said this before we went to summer break. I think he needs to be sheltered. I think that there's a lot of pressure on the business side and the media side of the sport that is,
yep,
for someone of his youth, I think he needs a little bit more opportunity to bloom because yes, you may compare his talent to Max, but he has a very different personality and a very different life that he's led compared to Max. So it's not really fair to kind of put that experience on him, let alone Max had that time at Toro Rosso to be out of that spotlight as that young talent. And it's something that I wish that we would change a little bit inside of like motorsport in F1 is to really see the drivers as humans as much as we see them as the capable athletes that they are, because it's a hard thing to navigate that. So
Right.
I was really proud of Mercedes at where they are at this point, considering where they were. But I hope that they, like the summer gave them and the Kimmy behavior over this month helps them to see how to better protect both of their drivers. What are your
Hmm.
thoughts?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think if you look at teams that have done a really exemplary job of dealing with the young talent, you would have to say, look, you got Mercedes, you got Williams, and you got this year Sauber with Bortoleto, and maybe to a degree Haas. Hard to say because Haas is, they're so up and down, but all those teams have either got young rookie drivers this year or they have had recently young rookie drivers. And they've done a great job of nurturing those drivers. And I agree with you. I mean, these are young people, right? 18, 19 years old. And they're being subjected to a media spotlight that I would argue is far brighter on them than it would be on, say, a rookie coming into the NFL or the NBA because he's got teammates all around him. They're all on the floor at the same time, actually being teammates. Whereas really the guy you're judged against is your own teammate in Formula One. And so Kimmy is being judged against George, right? Who is really good. Not that Kimmy isn't, but George just has the experience and all this other stuff. He's already been there. I think it says a lot about Toto Wolff and James Vowles and guys like that, that they are doing a good job of kind of sheltering their drivers to the extent that they can because there are commercial responsibilities. Yeah.
I think you raise such a good point, Dick. I don't think people fully grasp that. And I'm so glad that you highlighted it, the comparison of a rookie in the NFL versus F1. And the nature of F1 itself for a driver is very isolating. And
Yep.
then you add in what you just explained. It's so true. And I hope that our listeners really, if they had more criticism to these younger drivers, would take this to heart of especially those who come from the US who's most inundated with like NFL, NBA, and all those different teams might not understand how hard this is. And I think that even the travel schedule and the lack, and if you're young,
Oh, yeah.
it's not like you have the frame of reference to even know how to plan all these different things. Like with life, you start to figure out, okay, this is what I need to travel, and this is what I need for downtime. When you're young, all of it's shiny and you're just happy to be there. You're willing to do whatever. And you may not realize the toll it's taking. And if you
Right.
don't like, and so I agree, it is good that the team seems to be adjusting. I hope they continue to adjust so that way they can manage him
Yep.
well.
Agreed.
Okay,
Agreed.
so then let's move. Oh, I thought it was going to be Red Bull. Let's move to Ferrari and then we'll come to Red Bull. Is that
Yep.
okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Of course.
So Ferrari had a difficult Baku. They're dropping from second to third, that swap that we talked about earlier with Mercedes.
Yep.
And Red Bull now is a close fourth behind them. Charles is in fifth, and then Lewis is in sixth. I don't know what to think of all this. I mean, and here's one thing I did read. I almost choked on my coffee when I read it one morning, which is, quote, Ferrari is the gold standard right now for pit stops. Only one of Ferrari's last 15 pit stops has been over 3 seconds, with a solid mean of 2.38 seconds pit stop
Good Lord.
average.
That's
Right.
crazy.
Like, who would have thought that a few years ago? I mean,
Right.
remember when we'd be like face palming every time they did this? So, I mean, I know there's been a lot of razzing on what's going on at Ferrari. This is something that has been improved.
Yep.
That said, the sport is not about only pit stops. I mean, there are a lot of other things they have to be working on. And so, as much as they've been focused on that, I'm worried because there are a lot of other things clearly you guys have to be working on at Ferrari over there.
Yep.
So that's one side that I was thinking about. The other is looking at Lewis. I didn't even think about Charles, which was shocker. I know as a Charles fan, I just kind of like Charles has to be used to all of this at this point in frustration and just kind of going, I'm going with it. But I felt a high level of empathy to Lewis because I had read this article that had compared the Carlos to Williams and Lewis to Ferrari change. And they said, quote, changing teams in Formula One isn't easy. It's a new car, new operation, new steering wheel, and new engine. For Sainz, his 4 years with Ferrari were the longest he'd spent with a single team. For Hamilton, his 12 years with Mercedes were his longest, while his 18 using Mercedes engines were monumental. Hamilton has never adapted to the ground effect aero cars, but neither did Ferrari, nor Mercedes, nor anyone on the grid, bar Red Bull's Adrian Newey, and arguably McLaren more lately. So here's where I came to this. I was wondering as I read this, is this a reasonable assessment or making excuses? I asked because after listening to our F1 Legend series, I was reminded again, because of what you said, how much Lewis brings to the sport. And I found myself wondering whether Lewis has the ability to peak again. Couple that with the news of his personal life, the death of his beloved dog, just this week, I asked whether this was a lot of change for someone. And is he really truly able to optimize his amazing talent in an environment that can truly understand him and even optimize him? Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
it just feels like when we just take away the Formula One aspect and just think about a person changing jobs in the same industry, moving and learning and language and culture, is what's being asked of even this amazing legend, is that even realistic?
Yeah. And I think my answer is with the new cars coming out,
Mm-hmm.
my guess is that you'll see a reinvigorated Lewis. I think that the ground effects cars he just never got to grips with them for whatever reason, even though he won races in the ground effect era.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think Lewis is going to come right. I feel really, really sad for him about the loss of Roscoe. Losing your buddy like that, that's so hard. And I've certainly had to go through that a few times, and it's just awful. So I can understand how Lewis must feel. But that being said, he will move on. He is a champion. And I think that as long as his motivation is there, I think when the new cars come out, he'll be a lot more motivated. He'll have had a season with Ferrari. He'll be kind of acclimated to the team and the way they do things and all that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Well, that's true. If he gives them this year and then tries to endure through next year and see where it goes, he loses really nothing.
Right,
Yeah, that's
right,
a valid point. And maybe
right. I
that's the
mean,
hope that he holds on to.
we're talking about, oh, Lewis is really off form. Well, he's sixth and he's only one place behind his teammate
Well,
who's been
yes,
there
that is true.
forever,
That
right?
is
And I
true.
mean, it's just sort of like, come on, guys, this has not been, it's a disaster by Lewis's standards, but it's not a disaster really. Because I mean, if you think about it, okay, he left Mercedes and went to Ferrari, but I mean, Mercedes ain't winning all the races, you know.
That's very true.
Anyway, that's the way
Yeah,
I
I
look at
mean,
it.
and especially because he's coming at it from a different perspective than like a rookie. This is a champion thinking like because his analysis is going to look with experience and with his talent, the options on the field. Yeah, I could see what you mean. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
Okay. Now let's transition to Red Bull. We'll go
Okay.
back a little bit to that. So Max is in the third in the drivers championship, but he's got a significant gap to Oscar. And then of course Red Bull's in fourth. There are 7 races that remain, and as we said earlier, Max has a mathematical chance, but it's also a steep uphill battle. So I think it is kind of improbable, but it is something that only I think only Max could do and challenge those McLarens. And this month's Baku and Monza race tells us he does have that ability. And I would be so excited if that started at Coda because I'm planning to go to Coda for the
Sure.
race.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that would be kind of cool to see that in person. I guess one of the things that I kept thinking about was that this week, in addition to listening to our F1 Legends, I listened to an interview that Max's former performance coach, like he just left him last year. He did an interview and a quote in there that I thought was very insightful about Max was a mantra that they said all, I think at least last year, if not the last 2 years, which is, quote, consistency. Repeating it week in, week out is what separates the good, the great, and the special. And then he said, champions don't become champions in the moment that they win the event, but in the hours, the weeks, the months they put in. And
Yep.
so, couple that with what you noted about just Max's demeanor. One of the insights that came from the interview was that before this performance coach, Max had a lot more emotion in his racing. And you even highlighted it in your legends, where I think it was Charlie Whiting that you had noted had really taken Max under his wing and helped him to harness emotion in his driving. And I
Hmm.
heard that kind of at the same time that I heard this performance coach talking about that that was one of his key goals, was to help Max just get into that flow state of just calmness, and that he could just be, and that he could just bring it out. So then when I heard the commentary that Max gave during the Monza race, I thought, oh, it's really become ingrained in him.
Right.
Because, like for me personally, as I noted, I've have a lot that I'm juggling, and it resonated deeply because I thought that's the only way that you can do a lot, is if you figure out the ways to just be consistent. So that way you're allowing for consistency to just happen. You're not having to think about the smaller stuff. And so that was really what I was kind of impressed with, was that talent and opportunity coupling that you see happening in him, which is why I think that that consistency allows that coupling to happen of talent and opportunity
Hmm.
to know that. So I'm optimistic that he's actually going to give the McLarens a run for their money and position himself really. And to use a line from David Coulthard, let the racing gods smile down on him. That's where I think, even though it's a low probability but a high stakes, I actually could see him somehow shocking all of us. So that's on Max. Before we move on to Yuki, I want to stop talking and let you respond to what I said.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think, again, it's like I said, you just look at his body language. The dude's just relaxed. He's having
Mhm.
fun. I mean, he's got an off weekend. All the other drivers are off, taking a break and all that. What's he doing? He's driving in a 4-hour endurance race at the Nürburgring, driving a Ferrari sports car. That says a lot to me, man. That's like Alonso. Most of those guys aren't thinking about racing on the off weekends. They're catching their breath. But guys like Max and Fernando, they're out pounding out laps in a go-kart or around the Nürburgring in a GT3 car, for crying out loud. So he's just really interested in racing, and a very relaxed Max who doesn't really believe that he can win the world championship, but hey, let's give it a go anyway. That's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And when you said that, it made me think of that interview again, where his performance coach said that he's constantly competitiveness. He said, especially before he met Kelly, or as I think the phrase was, before he got all loved up, he said they used to play games at his place, like on the virtual games, and the level of competitiveness that he took to every single thing that he did
Yeah.
was what this coach said sets him apart. And so when he said that, I did think about how you had noted that Fernando is the same relentless pursuit
Yep.
of the craft and competition. So I think you're right. And that's why, as much as it seems statistically impossible, I think we shouldn't discount him a surprise resurgence, especially couple that with a McLaren if they just start spiraling, which I hope they don't. Okay, so on the other side of the garage, Yuki. You want me to tell you what I'm thinking, or you want to go
Go
first?
for it. Go
Okay.
for it.
I think he should still have time to prove himself. I personally think that Laurent, someone who knows him from Racing Bulls, can give him just the opportunity, if he can, to have a little bit longer of a runway before they have to make any changes. Because I believe Yuki can do this change. Not necessarily, I don't think he thinks this, and I don't think anybody thinks that he's really going to be able to compete against Max, but can he be a true number two? I think that that is a possibility still, because I think we see a lot of maturation that's happened over the course of just the few weeks that he's been there. And I would like to see him be able to do that the rest of the season to prove a lot of the people wrong that have just kind of put him in a box of what he was, that, very vocal, boisterous, aggressive driver when he was at, what were they then? AlphaTauri.
Yep.
He's not Max. I don't think he is consistent enough. But I guess the question I've had is the inconsistency solely on him? I don't know how much of that is actually out of his control. I mean, he did finish sixth in Baku. That was the best of his results of all this season. He contributed valuable points to Red Bull's constructor battle. And he noted in the post race that he could have actually attacked Liam, but he was looking at the needs of the team and even Max, and he did not want to go any further and lose those points. And when I heard him say that, I thought, I don't know that I would have heard him say a statement like that a few years ago. That
True.
it would have been so much more about him and what he wanted. And so I do think there's a level of resignation in him that he knows that he can't challenge Max. But I think he also knows that if he loses this seat, it's game over for him in the world of Formula One. Now, I think he can likely move to something else in motorsport, but I think he's hoping to stay at least through this next reg cycle and see that change and prove his ability. And with Laurent, I have to wonder if that might actually be a possibility. Could him
Hmm.
staying enable them to grow him even more and figure out a way to get that relentlessness under a controlled manner, and having a good weekend when the car might be back on track. I have to wonder how much it helps with that confidence and might actually help him unlock his potential. So that's kind of what I was thinking about Yuki.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think your point about the fact that Laurent knows him, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big deal. I hadn't really considered that, but when you mentioned it, I thought, oh yeah, that's a great point. What I read is that Red Bull's not making a decision about their number two until end of October. So Yuki's got a little bit of time left to put in some good solid performances, which I think he can do. I'm like you. I think Yuki probably deserves a bit more time, given Red Bull's history with their number two drivers. I mean, it's just like, But then the other part is, okay, so they give Yuki the boot. Yeah, they can move Hadjar up to Red Bull, but Hadjar has already said, yeah, I don't know if I want to do that. And I mean, he's going to have to go because he's a Red Bull driver. But the other part is, I don't think that they really have many choices to fill the second seat at Racing Bulls under that circumstance. So I don't know. I mean, he may actually have a better shot at it than maybe what we thought.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So my order that we were going was based off of the standings, but I think it makes the most sense to make a swap here and switch over to Racing Bulls,
okay.
because I agree with you. Like, I wish that the original lineup between Racing Bulls and Red Bulls in Australia would have been Max and Yuki, Liam and Isaac.
Yep.
I think that would have put them in a much better position to have gained much better data to understand where their driver's capacity. Instead, you're got Yuki on a very short runway trying to prove himself after so many years of feeling marginalized. Liam
Yep.
got brought up there mentally destroyed, and now they're trying to rehab him. You're now seeing Isaac has such potential, but if you prematurely put him in there, are you going to repeat what seems to be the churning through in that hopper on that seat? Instead, what I would love is them to say, we keep all four of them just as it is and
Yep.
don't do anything. And let's get through this 1 year of reg cycles. If I was in Isaac's position, I'd be trying to convince them, let me stay here. Don't
Right.
let me go. Because you don't even know as Isaac if Red Bull is going to get this right now that they've lost Adrian Newey and they've also lost Christian Horner. Like, you
And
would
Honda
hope,
engines.
and Honda engines, right? There's so many different elements now. Do you really want to be placed in there? I don't know, and have to deal with Max, like, not in a
Right.
bad way. I'm saying is he's just in a league of his own. And what does
Yep.
that do to your future prospects? Instead, sit in Racing Bulls, continue to be out of the limelight, and let your skill only increase your value. So that way, either A, you stay or you move up, if you get to be writing your own ticket, and like in that sense, he's kind of like taking a page from Carlos Sainz's book of
Yep.
do well so nobody questions if you're worth the investment, and you get to decide as much as possible where you go. I mean,
Yep.
Liam, I think, would do great there. I don't know where he could move. If now, what I have heard, I know you said you hadn't heard. The only thing I'd heard was that Liam might stay if Yuki is out. Isaac is in at Red Bull. Then they would bring Arvid Lindblad
Right.
into that seat at Racing Bulls. But I think some of that is also contingent on how well he does in the F2
Right.
series, which is also, as we know, super competitive this year.
Sure.
So,
Exactly.
so I don't know. That's a lot. Again, I
Exactly.
threw a lot of information at you, but your thoughts?
No, I'm actually with you 100%. I would rather see Red Bull and Racing Bulls stand pat with the driver lineups that they have, and then piece it together throughout the year and just work out who's really performing under these new regs. I mean, we know what Max can do. Here's the thing. Isaac and Liam, all they know are ground effect Formula One cars. So now all of a sudden they're going to be driving a completely different kind of car, along with a whole different engine system. So I don't
That
know.
is such a good point. Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's good. All right. So we're going to go backwards since we skipped over them in the standings, which
Mhm.
is Williams. And they sit in fifth place in the constructors right now, especially after Carlos's podium, the first podium they've had since 2017. And I have to believe that has got to be one of the biggest boosts for them. So going back to my highlight, I really hope that this podium encourages the entire team, especially Alex. I feel like there's a really good synergy between Carlos and Alex, which it feels like you when you look over Carlos's career, he consistently has good relationships
Yep.
with his teammates. I mean,
Yep.
even when he was matched up with Max, it just seems like he's got a very affable demeanor, and
Yep.
I don't know if that's something that he was raised with or his personality, which I love. It's very endearing. And so when I look at Alex, I feel like for someone who has been with the team for as long as he has, it would be wonderful for that synergy to continue and for Alex to get boosted and for them both to just bring the team forward. And I, especially with the new reg cycle, I know that the development has moved because they've said this more towards 2026. So I'm wondering if this is a more track specific podium,
Oh
but
yeah.
I'm really hoping they can slip in a couple more of these achievements somewhere. And it would be great if at some point this year that was Alex. And but I wonder how much of that is the dominoes need to line up, kind of like what happened at Baku as well, but it's consistency on his part, not to mention the car. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think, Baku was a situation of the car suiting the track. And I think if you think about Baku, street circuit, long, long, long straightaway, all that kind of good stuff. What other track sounds like that? Las Vegas, and cooler temperatures. That was the other thing, right? That it was
Yeah.
cooler, and so I'm sitting here thinking, Williams might be able to sneak in another podium or at least a really strong result. And you know what? If Alex scores it, I'll be really happy to see that for him. So, yeah, let's see what happens.
Oh, that's exciting. I love the idea of Las Vegas. That'd be so good for them.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So then let's move on to Aston Martin. I say this with a sigh because I'm going to express like a little bit more of my frustration that I think I've shared with you and with John, but I've not ever really said on the recordings. I don't know how the Lance and Lawrence Stroll can continue this pathway of believing that Lance can become not just a race winner, but a champion. I know he's placed on podiums, but how much longer can he realistically continue this? Is, I guess, the question I walked
Mm.
away from this month because we have so much rising talent in the feeder series, and there's only so many seats,
Yep.
and so that really upsets me in a certain level because of these young talent need to be able to showcase that this is what they're working so hard for so many years, and the hope then is as a test driver, reserve driver, like all this stuff. And is it ever at a certain point their expiration to actually achieve Formula One
Yeah.
dissipates? And so that's really hard for me. Now, looking at Fernando, could make the argument as well, like, Fernando, you've been doing this. Okay. But the thing is, Fernando is consistently bringing to the team some, like his very best. And you don't question a world champion's ability, I guess. Well, I guess I did earlier with Lewis, but not, it's just different. I don't know why. In my brain, I put them on two different levels of, I don't question that Fernando knows how to win or Fernando knows how to be a champion. He said in a recent article that I read that it's a question of when in his mind as to when Aston Martin will be competitive. And like the quote he said was, Aston Martin fighting for and winning the world championship is more or less guaranteed in the future. We have everything that is needed to fight for a world championship.
Yep.
I can believe that coming from him because he's done it.
Yep.
Do I believe that coming, like, that's not a statement Lance is making? And
No.
so this month just frustrated me because I kept thinking of other people that I would have rather seen. Not that I don't want it to be seen as like I'm bashing Lance. I'm not. I respect him and what he's already done. I, I guess I want him to be chivalrous and step aside. I guess that's a hard thing for me to say.
Yeah, well, okay. I mean, there's a lot of people who are saying that. To me, Lance is a bit of an enigma. I'm not really sure what to make of him. Let's put it to you this way. He is ahead of Fernando in the points this year, but Fernando also has had more DNFs when he was in position to score points. So there's that. And
Yes.
Fernando is 23 and 0 or something like that against Lance so far in qualifying since the last time Lance outqualified Fernando. It's a big number. Is the sheer speed there? No. But then on the other hand, he's also being compared against a guy that is really to a large degree a freak of nature. It's kind of hard to say. Certainly, Fernando has proven that he's way more adaptable. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes back to what you said. Like, if he had been able to finish the Australia race, and I remember there was at least one, if not two, where the car failed him for the DNF.
Right.
That's not
Right.
racing talent or racecraft that caused him not to get
Right.
points.
Yeah.
I don't know that I just can't, because I don't really think this often about Lance, but when I was going through, it just kept coming back to me. I was like, yikes, like, come on.
Right.
And I don't think he needs to walk away from the team. I think he would be a fantastic contributor to the actual racing business. I think
Hmm.
he has such insight by virtue of being the racer that if I were Lawrence, I'd be wanting to put my son in the seat of managing it, because I think if anything, maybe Lance has the capacity to be the business leader in a way that maybe we may not even fully grasp. I don't know. Something about him just strikes me as
Hmm.
probably got some of the soft, or he's got some of the rough edges that his dad doesn't have. Like, wait, I'm saying it incorrectly. Like, the things that are rough on his dad are probably smoother on Lance. And
Hmm.
because he has raced, there's a level of respectability when he may say or encourage something, like, I don't know.
Right.
Maybe that's me just being super hopeful and wanting to sell this, like, make your walk into the sunset, please, for everybody else. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so then moving on to Kick Sauber. I felt that it was a bummer that Nico had to retire at Monza even before the race started.
Oh, yeah.
And that was just like weird.
I
And
was
I didn't
so
expect
surprised
that.
by that. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I didn't get to read or hear anything after the fact what that was all about. Did you hear anything?
I think it was a hydraulics issue, but I'm not
Oh,
certain
bless
of that.
them.
Yeah.
Of all the times. Well, and then Gabby brought in the only points for the team, the only points the team had this month. And I was really hoping that both of them could really be competing more in the midfield this month, but it just didn't happen. So do you think it's the car, or do you think it might even be their qualifying strategy? Like how they're deciding when to go
Um,
out?
I mean, it's probably a little bit of everything in
Mm,
my mind. I mean, Sauber's had a good run here lately, but you always have to wonder, okay, how much of that is track specific versus they've really, really improved the car. I mean, clearly they have, but have they improved it that much? I don't know. I kind of I put it to you this way. I think Singapore and Coda will be give us a better hint on that because those are two different circuits for sure. So that's kind of where my head's at with those guys. Although I will say I was a bit surprised that they had kind of a so-so kind of month, to be honest with you.
Yeah, right. Like, especially coming on the heels of summer, you would have thought
Yep.
there would have been a little bit more. Okay. I like the idea of forecasting towards Singapore and Coda. Okay, then let's move on to Haas, Esteban and Ollie. So Haas, it felt like had a very difficult month as well. Like they had a very good showing in Netherlands, but then Monza and Baku were pretty disappointing. The team, I feel like, is sitting there in the sixth position, but they need to find that consistency. I looked at Ollie. He was really kind of always there on the cusp of scoring points. And really, the Netherlands was his best showing. But he's been actually beating Esteban, I think, if my
Yep.
notes are correct. So
Hmm.
I just am wondering if maybe what we're seeing is that the overly aggressive behavior that kind of typified Esteban in previous teams that we've kind of become accustomed to has kind of tempered a little bit and it's gone in the other direction, kind of reined it in. And now they need to figure out how to get him to bring that a little bit back over, like find that balance of aggressive and
Yep.
controlled. But
Yep.
I kind of overlooked them as a team this month outside of the Netherlands because I don't know, it just didn't seem, and I didn't anticipate that. I really thought that Monza had these different characteristics than either Zandvoort or Baku that would have really helped Haas to shine, but it just really didn't happen.
Hmm. Yeah, I think my take is that Ollie is having one of those quiet rookie seasons
Hmm.
that is just super impressive. Again, a little bit like Bortoleto. I mean, I don't know if more people are talking about Ollie or Bortoleto, but both of those guys, considering that they're not driving the best car on the grid, they're getting some terrific results.
Very
And
true.
and they are certainly matching up well against very experienced teammates who are very proven. I mean, everyone knows that on his day, Esteban is as quick as they get. I mean, the guy is capable of being really, really quick. It's just that he's been, he's got a habit of making mental errors. But I mean, bottom line is that he's a pretty good marker for Ollie, and Ollie's doing a good job. I wouldn't be surprised if when Lewis retires, if Ollie isn't the guy that they pick up and slot into that second seat at
Mm,
Ferrari.
that's a good point. I do like that the comparison of the four, like the two pairs of the rookies
Yep.
being measured against their teammates in that way. That's a good way to look at it.
Yep.
Well, okay. So the final team is another matching of a rookie with a more well established teammate, which is Alpine with Pierre and Franco. I wrote in my notes I don't really have a lot of opinions. And when you look at my notes, I actually do have a lot of opinions. So that's kind
Right.
of comical. So when you look at the driver ratings, Pierre is equal to Yuki and ahead of most, but not all the rookies. That said, he's the only one who has brought points for Alpine, though none came in these past three races. His highest finish was actually at Silverstone. So to me, I kept wondering is what does this say for the team looking at the rest of the calendar? Are they giving a seasoned driver a good car? And does it really come down to that? Is it the car, the team, the culture, all of the above? I just kept trying to wrap my head around this because what we can say is Pierre has capacity. I have to believe that. I mean, he's had really good seasons, but what does that do for his confidence, his mental health, even his skill maintenance, let alone his reputation, if he's not in a car or with a team that allows him to realize his fullest potential? That's just looking at him, let alone the rookie on the other side. But I
Hmm.
wondered what your thoughts are on Pierre.
Well, it's kind of interesting to me because number one, something that I hadn't considered, but Renault is pulling out at the end of the season. And if Renault is pulling out at the end of the season, they've known it for a while now. So how much development work have they been doing on that engine? My bet is that they don't have nearly the power of any of the other engines that are out there. And so now next year, Alpine is going to Mercedes, and everybody seems to think that it's going to be Alpine and Honda with the two best engines out there. So all of a sudden, let's say that the down on power engine has masked what is actually a pretty good chassis. What would happen, like right now, if you plugged a Mercedes in the back of that car? What would happen? Would it suddenly make Pierre a much more competitive proposition? I don't know. But like I said, he signed an extension to his contract. So I'm thinking he must figure, hey, there are some things on the horizon that might give cause for optimism. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
That is such a fantastic insight, Dick. Such a great point. Like
So
I wish they could just put the Mercedes engine in there now so we could see that. No,
yeah, wouldn't that be interesting?
that would be so good.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
we do know that they are able to be up there at the front.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish we could see that. That would be kind of cool.
That'd be
You know,
good.
you know they have all these AI things. Maybe there's an AI that could figure that out for us.
Exactly.
If
Exactly.
any of our listeners know how to do that, send that to us. That'd be
Yeah,
really
right.
fun.
Exactly.
Okay, so then on the other side of the garage, Franco. I have to say I feel for him. I think he thought the reality would be much different than what it actually ended up being when he came into Formula One or even Alpine. And I have to wonder how much he and his team really thought through the decision to go to Alpine in the sense that it's every racer's dream to be in Formula One, but like what were the other options for him between a Williams and an Alpine? Uh, it just seems that he made what I feel like a lot of rookies make a decision, or anybody who's aspiring to be in motorsports, is you take whatever opportunity, no matter how hard or awful it might be, because you
Yep.
want that chance and you tell yourself, I'm going to be the one to beat the odds. I'm going to be the one to do it. And I just wonder how much this must be like. He came in with a lot of expectations and
Yep.
it's not coming through. And so I feel for him as much as I've also felt for Jack Doohan,
Right.
and the prospect of next year having another rookie in that seat being churned through that hopper also just disappoints me and makes me sad, until you had said what you just said, which is if that Mercedes engine gets in there and it totally changes the game, that rookie who gets to be in that seat might be really glad. In that case, I would love to see them bring back Jack Doohan or somebody, like give
Yeah.
him a bit of a redo. I don't know.
Well,
What are your thoughts?
my thought is that number one, if you notice, the gap between Pierre and Franco has been steadily closing. And in fact, it seems like one of the races this year, I mean, this month, Franco outqualified Pierre. I need to go back and look at that. But certainly the gap has closed. And it may very well be that between performances that are improving and the fact that he brings quite a bit of sponsorship money from Argentina, he may wind up in that seat again next year. Because I mean,
Oh, that's
right,
good.
because if you think about it, they've invested a lot of money in him. And if he is suddenly occasionally out qualifying Pierre, who everybody knows is a terrific race driver, then all of a sudden it's sort of like, yeah, let's give the kid another season. Now, Flavio isn't known for his patience, but maybe he can be wise.
And that may even be where the money that Franco brings in gives him
Hmm.
that little extra cushion.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be
Yep.
good.
Yep.
That would be good. Yeah, I
So,
like that.
yep.
Maybe if he's listening, he'll take that into consideration.
Yeah.
Okay, so that leads us to our final takeaways. One of the questions we ask is, if I'm a new fan, what should I keep watching in regarding to these races, or even looking forward to the future races? So here's what I would say is that I think that these races really could herald some micro changes in the standings. That said, I think we've already alluded to this, is that Singapore is a bit of a wild card outlier,
Yep.
and we'll see, I think, some similar results to improvements and changes in teams when we get to Coda. I think we'll also see a little bit in Mexico. I think the altitude, you've been so good about reminding me that and teaching about that when we came to our Aero conversations about Mexico. But I think Brazil also will give us some similar, more consistency results
Right.
because of the elements we see in Singapore that are unique to that race, the heat, being at night, a street track, but Coda is definitely more classic, like the Zandvoort and Monza races. So I would tell people that those are kind of the way to think about what we've seen and putting that into the context, I guess. And that where you, for me, those incremental changes that the teams will do to maximize the good things on their car will be critical, especially when we look at them in the midfield, front of field, and back of field as they jockey and make those, again, micro changes in those standings. I
Yep.
just don't see anybody because, as you noted before we went into summer break, there's not going to be someone who's going to all of a sudden jump from the back of field into the front of field. It's just
Yeah.
that's not realistic.
Yeah.
Then I do think the other thing that our audience should keep in mind is the sprint race impact that at Coda and then eventually in Brazil, that there will be sprint races which will impact the team's abilities to optimize and fine tune the car for that feature race of that weekend. So that means there will be more variables and unpredictability. But then you have Mexico, which doesn't have that sprint, and it will have a more traditional week. But then again, as I said, there's so many variables that are inherent in that
Yep.
race itself. And then
Yep.
I will say this, and as many times as I can, because I hope that F1 will stop doing these, is I am not a fan of sprint races because I just don't like them. They're just a dimension that I don't think are necessary. So I say that in case anybody's listening from Formula One. I vote every time saying no more sprint races. Okay, which that was something that was on the news with, I think it was Stefano Macaulay broke some news early in the month of September talking about how they wanted to do more. And I was like screaming
Right.
at my computer, going, absolutely not. Stop this nonsense. Okay, off my soapbox. What are your thoughts on new fans regarding these races or the ones that are coming up?
Well, I think you pretty well nailed it. The other part, of course, that I think that everybody needs to watch is, and I've been harping on this, so, there's an echo in the room, but I think the other part is that we want to figure out if, in fact, Red Bull is for real.
Mm,
Right? And Singapore will be real interesting because traditionally Red Bull, for whatever reason, just doesn't go that great. It has something to do with the track surface, I think. But regardless, I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see what winds up happening in Singapore. But also, then, you would think that certainly at Coda, Max is going to be a threat. And then, as the season unwinds, we saw what he did to everybody in Brazil last year
mhm.
in the rain. So I think for me, that's kind of the takeaway. It's almost like, hey guys, we've gotten a glimpse at the future, and the future may have a Red Bull in front of it of everybody. So that's kind of what
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you went into that Singapore because, like I looked at some of the data. I didn't do a deep dive, but it said that Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull had each won 4 times at
Uh-huh.
Singapore, and that Sebastian Vettel had the most wins, followed by Lewis. It's one of the most physically demanding races on the calendar due to the heat, humidity, and the length of the race. And that street circuits favor teams that can execute an excellent qualifying session and manage that tire deck, and their strategy has to be on point. So everyone needs to be able to really execute despite all that physical toll. And so then when you add in McLaren specifically and their whole driver component, let alone the constructors, I think this would, if they secure the Singapore win, that's how they clinch the championship for constructors. And so for Oscar, going back to the whole grid penalty, it means in order for him to keep that gap substantial or not lose the gap. I didn't do all the numbers, but this Singapore race will be critical with all, like I just
Hmm.
feel like the deck is stacked against him, but he can overcome that. There's no question.
Right.
Like and or both of them are just going to really do a great job of fighting for that position, which is hopefully going to bring a really good race, like, and
Right.
watch the qualifying. Like you don't make the mistake of not watching quali and just coming into the race itself.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just don't know. The
Yeah.
other, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was also going to say, this is probably Oscar's other home race.
That's
And
true.
so there may be a little bit there just because he's going to have more support in the stands.
That's
So
so
it's
true.
possible.
That is very true. And like I think he even adopted Monaco, right, at one point sometime last year, saying that he's now a Leclerc family member. There was a
Oh, there you
joke
go.
that, yeah, there was a joke in the social media world. I can't remember how it all happened, but yeah, you're right. The Singapore is what he considers another home race. Okay, so this was something I wanted to share because I thought was fascinating. If anybody hasn't listened to the post, it doesn't take time to listen to the post race debrief on F1 TV. I really think there's some great insights. And this, after the Baku race, was Juan Pablo Montoya and James Hinchcliffe and Laura Winter. They did some really great analysis forecasting, and I thought it would be worth sharing it with our audience. He, being Juan Pablo Montoya, mentioned during post race at Baku that this is the part of the season, and even somewhat in the reg cycles, where teams start looking at other elements to tweak that might have been overlooked during the rest of the season. Specifically, he noted that throughout the year, that often the first answer to quote fixing the car is to just add downforce. And he said, well, that brings a whole set of other issues, problems like affecting mechanical grip. And at a certain point, adding downforce really isn't the solution because you just can't anymore. So the teams start considering other overlooked elements, and that's how we start to see certain teams at certain tracks sometimes pull off the unexpected. And then it's all about optimizing what you have rather than development, because nothing
Hmm.
new is actually coming. And when he
Right.
said that, it made me think of what you had said over and over, that like this is kind of like that turning point, and but you still are wanting to be competitive, and this is where track specific things can really make a big difference. And he even noted, like, case in point is Red Bull, as much as they've been listening and might not like hear this, what they're doing right now, I think, is actually a testament to the project that Christian led, that the team is still seeing the residuals and advantages of his leadership that they're able to actually right now optimize. I know that I've read some who would like to attribute the resurgence to Laurent. I'm not knocking him, but I just don't think that they, being Red Bull, have had time to allow Laurent to acclimate and adjust
Right.
everything that would really truly be impacting the team and the car so dramatically. And so
Hmm.
this is where again goes back to why I think Isaac should just chill out, stay at Racing Bulls, see how all this kind of falls out. What are your
Yep.
thoughts about what I shared?
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. Who knows what bits were put on the car that, took the time that made the car maybe more drivable or improved the setup window, something like that. Remember when we've talked about this before, that you can cram a bunch of downforce on the car, but if it takes away the drivability of the car, then you
Mm-hmm.
really kind of want to back off of that and have a car that's more drivable because it's going to be a bit more user friendly for the driver. So you just never know, maybe they went just a little bit too far in their search for downforce and, aerodynamic efficiency and all this kind of jazz, and it messed up something else. So, I mean, it's hard to say, at this stage, but I don't think there's any question that they have found something,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you think about like the development time to get the part or parts needed to make that fix, it probably that work probably had already started before Christian left the team or shortly thereafter. And so you're right. I mean, Laurent he's just not been there long enough to have, had that kind of an effect on the team.
Right. And I think that if anything, it's not saying that he's not capable of leading the team. It's just,
Oh yeah.
it's like in any corporation, just because you change the CEO doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden all the successes are all the result of the new CEO. There's a lot of stuff and,
Oh
brain
yeah.
and institutional. So that's, I guess, where I came at that. The other thing that
Yep.
I thought was interesting from that conversation between the three of them is that they said that after they had finished the interview with Yuki, it was off camera. I think they'd cut away to like an analysis piece. They said that Yuki told him that Baku was negative degradation. I really hadn't heard that before. They
Yeah, that's
explained it a
unusual.
little bit. Yeah, that's what they said. It was very unusual, especially to happen at Baku of all places. But they said that that might have been a reason that McLaren's strength this year, which had been downforce and tire management, were essentially neutralized during that race. And that they noted that the upcoming races are going to be hot, and you're going to have much more bigger wings. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. That could bring back that resurgence again
Yep.
for McLaren if they get everything else um, in place and
Yep.
executed well. What are your
Yep.
thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really interesting deal. Basically what he's saying is that the tires did not degrade. And so that's very unique in the situation, which says to me, well, the cooler temperatures certainly helped. The track surface was evidently not terribly abrasive, right? And they probably were running some pretty decent downforce levels, so the car wasn't sliding around, tearing up the tires. It's
Do you think
interesting.
that
The
could
other
be a precursor for Vegas?
could be. The other thing is how judicious the drivers are on the throttle. Because if
Mm,
you get on the throttle too early and too hard, that's a great way to destroy your rear tires.
right. And that's usually because you're reacting to something, right?
Hmm.
Or you're over anticipating it. Hmm.
Yep. Yep. Too aggressive on the throttle. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so the audience doesn't know this, but I'm going to say this is that you have been graciously trying to get through the 2026 regs, analyze them as much as whatever's out here in the public. And I'm really excited that you're trying to accomplish this. And if it doesn't work out, because I know you've got a day job and so many other things that you're working on, but I feel like it would be good, even right now, for our new listeners, because we've talked about the 2026 regs and everyone's talking about it, is if you're able to just tell me if I'm on the right track as a good summary as to what these regs mean. Is that good? Can we do
Sure.
that? Okay.
Sure.
So these regs are significant because F1 is entering a new technical era with major changes to the power unit and to the aerodynamic regulations, let alone a lot of other things. But teams like Williams and Racing Bulls are already shifting in that development resources to 26, which is why I think we're seeing some of the teams prioritize their long-term positioning over short-term gains. So for like drivers like Isaac staying in that competitive seat through this transition, as I said earlier, really could be valuable than jumping to a team that's at the top prematurely, because these regs are really going to reset the competitive order. Based
Yep.
off of that, Dick, how would you help our listeners, especially if they're new to Formula One, to just really understand the significance of a regs change?
Yeah, so when you have a regulation change, and in this case, it's the engine formula and the aero or the chassis formula, as you've already noted. I think the big one, of course, is going to be around the power units. They're going to a 50-50 split. Half of the power comes from the internal combustion engine, the other part comes from the electrification. And there's a lot of concern that the cars are going to run out of power about three-quarters of the way down the straightaway. So learning how to manage that power is going to be a really big deal. The drivers who are more adaptable, I think, are going to be in better shape. And then you have a whole different aero thing where you've got movable front and rear wings and stuff like that so that you can change the aerodynamic balance, increase grip levels and reduce them and all that, from corner to corner. So that, I mean, that could be very, very interesting. I think the cars are going to be very quick in a straight line until they run out of energy at the end of the straightaways. I'm personally not a big fan.
Mm-hmm.
They are running on 100% renewable fuel, which I think is a very interesting technical exercise. But, they're already talking about replacing these engines after a very short time with either a V8 or a V10. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying, Liberty Media, if you are listening, please give us a V10. But
Yes.
whatever. When you go to a Grand Prix race and you don't need ear protection, I'm sorry, there's something wrong. The purist in me is just going to say no. Until you've heard either a normally aspirated V8 or a V10, you have no idea what I'm talking about because those engines are freaking painful. When they go by, they are screaming. And it's just part of what Grand Prix racing ought to be, man. It's just unbelievably cool.
As someone who has not had the opportunity to experience that, I really do want that. I think it just it's what you envision, fantasize like when you watch the movies or you
Hmm.
watch the old films. So I'm with you. Like I'm kind of jealous that you were paying attention to the sport in the racing world during during that era. You know, that it
You
was
know,
real to you.
I got to see one of the very first F1 cars with a semi-automatic transmission and a V12 engine. It was a Ferrari 642, I think it was. It was ex-Mansell. And it was being driven at a track here in Texas that no longer exists, but it was a demo for Ferrari of North America. And they flew this car in from Italy, and an Italian racing driver named Mauro Baldi drove it. And not many people know who he is, but he was a terrific sports car racer, and he had a few F1 starts as well. Anyway, he went out, and the first time that I heard a V12 with a semi-automatic transmission being downshifted, every downshift sounded like a rifle shot. It was spectacular, the sound. I mean, I can't even begin to describe it other than to say it was like every downshift sounded like a rifle shot, like the exhaust somehow snorting out of the exhaust pipes differently or something. It was just magic. And of course, the sound of it going by at, I don't know, seventh or eighth gear at 16 or 17,000 RPMs was just amazing. So
You
anyway,
can't, you nor our audience can see me, but I'm grinning from ear to ear because I'm just imagining this and thinking I can't fully grasp it because I've never experienced it. And I wished, again, I wish we could. Let me ask you this question. With all the regs, kind of like it seems from what I've kind of cursory read, there's a lot of people who are not really satisfied with it, where things are landing so far and they're
right.
concerned. Has the sport ever had a history of just saying, we're not going to do it. We're going to delay it for a year so we can really wrap around, or is it pretty much we're going to do this whether or not we've figured it out?
Right. It's usually damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. You know,
Oh
now
boy.
the sport has been good at saying, yeah, we kind of made a mistake. We're going to change things up. A great example of that was in the early 1960s when they went from a 2.5 liter engine down to a 1.5 liter engine. And the cars became very, very small and lightweight and all that kind of stuff. So they were still fairly fast, but the engines just weren't very impressive sounding. They were normally aspirated, they weren't turbocharged. So 1.5 liter engines, which is, the engines we have today are 1.6 liters, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
similar in size, way different in horsepower, of course, but they just weren't, I mean, they were just kind of meh. And so for the 1966 season, they basically came out and said, yeah, we made a mistake. We're going to go to a 3 liter engine. So they doubled the capacity of the engine. And what that did is that it opened the door for Cosworth to show up with their, the Cosworth DFV, which was a brilliantly designed V8 engine from Cosworth and Ford. And that engine was the kind of the gold standard all the way until the late 1970s. And that engine won a ton of. I don't think there's ever been an engine to win that many Grand Prix, and so they do change course. And I think what they're already seeing is they're kind of admitting, yeah, maybe we went just a little bit too far. And the manufacturers are all, other than Audi, are all kind of saying, yeah, we're spending way too much money on engines and developing this technology.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of one of the other things as you were sharing that made me wonder is if you realize that the regs aren't going where you need it to or to address the issues and you're going to have to basically go back to the drawing board in certain ways in the cost cap era, isn't that just a waste of
Oh yeah,
resources and frustration for teams, especially as they're trying to maintain their competitiveness? And like when you think about the commercial aspect of it, you want all you've done so much marketing these last 2 years to bring all these eyeballs and to the races, and if you don't give them a competitive season, it just
yeah,
seems like golly, it could be a really bad
yeah.
thing for the sport if
I
we
mean, you
if
think
we
about
don't
it,
figure it out.
if somebody gets it right,
Mm-hmm.
and one, like Red Bull did, where they
Mm-hmm.
won every race but one, what's that going to do to all the new fans who don't really understand what's going on?
Right.
So,
Yeah. Oh, I hope they figure it out or
yep,
do
me too.
something.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Okay. Well, on that note, I think we've covered quite a bit of ground.
We have.
I'm really grateful for your time. I really also have to
Likewise.
say I'm grateful for our audience, like their willingness to continue coming and listening and actually caring about what you and I have to say means a
Hmm.
lot to us.
Absolutely.
And we really can't wait to put out some more content. And we were working behind the scenes trying to get this stuff done as we're doing our day jobs. So please have patience with us as we're trying to get it all done. But we
You
really
bet.
love what being able to have these conversations, right, Dick?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I always enjoy them. They're great stuff.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too.
Okay, friends, what did you think of our conversation? Drop me a line via email, sabrina@2guysaGirlandF1.com. Can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. And with that, let me say, we'll keep talking and you can keep listening in because we're just 2 guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, Sabrina, thanks for listening.